Welcome back to the AMA Future of Marketing Summit and a special edition of my Non-Obvious Insights show. And I am very, very thrilled to have my friend Charlene Lee joining me right now. Welcome, Charlene.
Thanks so much, Rohit.
We are going to talk about a topic that I think has been so widely discussed, it's turned into a buzzword and perhaps even a cliche, which is disruption. And I know that there's a lot of people talking about it, but I believe there are none who are perhaps more qualified than Charlene, because you've written multiple books about what it takes to be a disruptive leader. And I thought where we could start is just maybe with you deflating some of the buzz around this term of disruption, and just talk about, like, how do you define disruption, and is it covered enough or is it overcovered? I mean, how do you feel about disruption?
I think it's overcovered from the perspective of being a technology or an innovation. And people constantly are looking for what's the next disruption that's going to drive exponential growth, right? And they come to me as a technologist, like, okay, tell us, use your crystal ball and tell us what the next disruption is.
Do you have an answer to that?
I don't. I wish I did, because if I did, I wouldn't be doing this. But I think more than anything else, it's the opposite. It's growth that creates disruption. And I define disruption as when our status quo world is turned upside down. And in particular, when the relationships that define how we work with customers, with each other inside an organization, the relationships are torn apart and being put back together again. Oftentimes it's a technology, sometimes it's a pandemic. Sometimes it's a recession. Sometimes it's social injustice that breaks those bounds. So many things lead to disruption, but it is that process of putting back those relationships that's so hard. And until then, we feel disrupted. So I think for us to think about disruption in a much more holistic way, it's a much better way to really addressing what's going on.
Well, and you talk a lot about being a leader of disruption, or perhaps a disruptive leader. And I know that in the marketing space, a lot of marketing leaders don't always see themselves as the leaders of disruption within an organization. Sometimes maybe that's an innovation person, or maybe it's a chief executive officer. What would it take for a marketing person to be the leader of disruption? And have you seen that in the past? And when does it work that way?
I think being a disruptive leader, or being a leader, first of all, is when you create change. Because if you're not creating change, then you're not a leader. You are a manager. And disruptive leaders create a huge amount of change, exponential change, and it throws everybody into a tizzy. You're breaking the ways that people normally work. And as a leader, you can't just break things. You have to put them back together again. So I would say, if you want to become a disruptive leader, look for the change. And you may not be able to feel comfortable yet driving huge amounts of disruption. I think you have to get into it and understand, first of all, how you have a disruption mindset for change. And then second of all, this is the leadership part, how do you get other people to come to your cause? Because if you want to create a lot of disruption, you're going to have to create a movement. And people need to know what they're going to be fighting for and be able to know what that cause is so they can carry themselves over those obstacles.
Well, and that fits perfectly, I think, into one of the things that maybe a lot of marketing leaders do consider themselves the custodian of, which is delivering on the movement, right? I mean, we want to change the way that people perceive maybe our brand, maybe the world in general, right? I mean, we're talking about being persuasive and what it takes to be persuasive. And I wonder if, when you look at the companies and organizations that have managed to succeed because they did not get disrupted, and you've written about this often in your books, what does it take to be a disruptive organization? What are the criteria or the qualities that you either look for or help companies to become?
The number one thing is this focus on the future customer. And I feel sometimes like a broken record, but it isn't just being obsessed or focused on people, but it's on your customers. It's really about thinking about your future customers. And in particular, one of the things I've talked about, even from the days when I wrote Groundswell, was the focus of how do you use these technologies to connect with customers. But it is a very specific focus on the future, so that if you understand what's going to happen in the future, then you can bring it back today and decide what you want to do about that. People sometimes say they spend like 10% of their time focusing on the future. I think it should just be the opposite. Yeah, you got to get the work done. But the higher up you are in an organization, especially in marketing, the more you have to focus on your customers and where they're going. Because you want to be there. You want to skate to where the puck is going to be. You want to skate to where the customers are going to be, not aim for where they are today. And when you get there, poof, they're gone.
So what do you? I'm interested in what you think about this idea. There's always this constant sort of attention, I think, especially with marketing, of we want to anticipate where the customer's going by asking them, and we kind of overuse, I think, these focus groups and these like customer surveys and all the tools of marketing to say, look, we want to just add, like, what do you want from us? And then there's the flip side of it, which is the visionary leader side that says, look, they don't know what they want. We need to make it up, and then we need to explain it to them and persuade them that this is what they actually want. So can you talk about that tension a little bit, like between listening to your customers and asking them questions and hoping they tell you what they really want versus just the idea that you should know and you should be able to kind of figure it out without them having to spell it out for you?
Focus groups and surveys are excellent to tell you where your customers are today or where they have been, but they can't tell you. You have to intuit. That's why I think ethnography, really going, sitting down, listening to them, having empathy for them, truly mapping out what the empathy is of how do they feel, what do they say, what do they think, and what do they do, to understand really what's going on, because they may not be able to articulate it. One of my favorite examples is when Facebook had saturated the college market, had saturated the high school market. They looked around and go, where's our addressable market? How do we grow? And they said the counterintuitive thing, which is the non-obvious thing, was to go and talk to their parents. I guarantee you, no student was saying, yeah, I want my parents in this network. None of them were saying that. But it was the thing is, they understood the needs of those students, made sure they met them, but also understood how to navigate these new relationships of having your parents in the same social network in order to grow. So that I use that as a very easy to understand example, because we all remember the moment when we finally got into Facebook. And this is not about,
or got out, for some people,
got out.
They've kind of gone through the whole cycle, right?
Exactly. So I look at it this way: truly understanding your customer needs from a place where they may not even be able to see it. If it was easy, everybody would be doing it. But it is looking for these non-obvious solutions, non-obvious problems that people have.
Hey, nice. Brand plug. Love it.
All for you.
See, that's why we get along so well. So let's shift our lens maybe with the remaining time we've got towards the future, and specifically towards the future of marketing. I know that you have the benefit, I think, of having dealt with people in many different parts of an organization, and mostly large organizations. You deal with large brands, large groups. And so all of these challenges behind like the silos and the different groups, and this group over here doing one thing and this group over here doing something else, like that's something you're intimately familiar with, I think. And so when it comes to thinking through the future of marketing, if there's a CMO or somebody who's running the marketing function of a large organization kind of listening in right now, what advice could you give them to help prepare for that future, assuming, we don't know what's going to come next, right? Nobody, like you said, nobody has the perfect crystal ball, but there are some things they can do to get ready for that future. So I'm interested in your advice for that person.
Yeah, what I find is the organizations that would be winners in this space. And again, there were always winners and losers. The winners would be the ones who can deeply embed that model of who that future customer is into and across the entire organization. This is not about tearing down silos. It's about building windows between them so that customers and their data can flow seamlessly across the entire organization. When you have one model of who your future customers are, then everybody can align themselves against that future customer. You go into any organization right now, and everybody has a different definition, different view of that customer. It's like the blind man feeling just the trunk or the nose or the tail of an elephant. We need one unified view of who that customer is, and regardless of whether you're looking at from customer service or finance, sales, or marketing. And so marketing's role here is to be that conscious to be the representative and to bring that voice of the customer, of the future customer, to bear inside the organization. That way, when somebody on the front lines in customer service comes across a customer, a future customer, recognizes them, can set up the alarm and say, I got one here. Everybody come around and look at this future customer. Let's watch them, observe them, learn from them so that we can all benefit from that.
Well, this is awesome advice. If people want to find out what you're doing, if they want to follow some of your writing and your research and your talks, I know you're doing virtual talks, but you're also frequently in the past or on stage, and maybe you're gonna eventually do a combination like me. Maybe it's mostly virtual for right now, but what's the best way for people to follow what you're doing and to read?
Come to my website. It's charlenele.com. Easiest thing you could imagine. I'm also on pretty much every single channel with that handle too as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me, for being part of this summit on the future of marketing. I really appreciate it.
Sure thing, Rohit. Anytime.